Welcome to another episode of the Collision Vision driven by Auto Body News. As always, I'm your host, Cole Strandberg. Today marks the very first episode of our latest series titled Operational Excellence Shop Strategies for Success. This is going to be an impactful and actionable series offering real life ways to improve the operations of your business. Today's guest is a good industry friend of mine and someone I consider to be one of the very best operators in the business. Walt Link was most recently a division VP for Gerber, though he's got some exciting entrepreneurial things happening right now, which we're going to talk about. Additionally, Walt and I are going to spend a lot of time in this conversation focusing on a topic near and dear to my heart: financial management and growth planning. Enjoy this episode with some great insights and a uniquely compelling perspective with Walt Link. This episode is sponsored by Hunter Engineering. At Hunter Engineering, the theme behind all their products is do it right, do it once. So when you're doing alignments, the time to find hidden damage is before you start, not after. The workflow for Hunter's collision alignment system surfaces the trouble right up front by providing 5 additional collision-specific measurements, like toe out on turn, maximum steer, and ride height, to find the problems right away. It's all about efficiency, so find the damage before it finds you. To learn more about Hunter's collision alignment system, visit hunter.com. Enjoy the show. Walt Link, thank you for joining us here on the Collision Vision.
Hey, Cole, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Really do.
Looking forward to a fun conversation. We go way back, and so there are a couple topics, especially today, that I'm looking forward to discussing with you. Before we dive in, we were just talking. It's late morning here on kind of a rainy Saturday. Not Saturday. Apologies. Midweek. What am I doing? Shows 6:30 a.m. flight this morning. Just landed. We're coming in, so hopefully we can keep this on the rails. Walt, walk us through your background in your own words.
Yeah, thanks. So I spent 4 of some of the best years of my life right out of high school. Joined the Navy, and obviously there's not a lot of careers that you can translate into civilian life. There are some, obviously, but not a whole bunch. And I was able to find a beautiful young lady that had a father that had been in the collision business his entire life, and it had been his dream to open up a collision center. But there were certain aspects of the business that he didn't feel he was comfortable doing, and I felt like that I was the missing link, if you will, in that. And so we decided to go into business together. We opened up a collision center back in 1997. And that collision center is still there today. But fast forward a few years later, I ended up selling my piece back to him and going to work for a couple of different companies inside the Atlanta area. One being Magnum Collision in Marietta. And then I also worked for a large dealer group, the Asbury Group, here, headquartered in Duluth, Georgia. Worked there for right at 10 years. And then was courted by Gerber Collision and Glass to work there. So I started with Gerber back in 2019, where I was the regional vice president for the entire Florida region for approximately a year and a half, maybe a couple more months, maybe 20 months. But anyway, about a year and a half, and had the opportunity to move back to the Atlanta area from Florida due to someone exiting their regional vice president position. and was lucky enough to be able to come back home here and do the same things in my backyard. Then in February of 22, the company structurally changed and did a restructure and decided to break the company up in divisions. And I was promoted to division vice president for the entire South. So I was responsible for about 185 stores ish. And it's a few more than that now. And about $650 million in top end revenue. And then back in November of 2023, we lost one of our teammates, division vice presidents in the West Division, and I was asked to take over the West Division, and I have been doing that ever since. And that was about 198 stores and roughly a budget of $720 million. So it's been a really good career for me. I can tell you this, Cole. The collision industry itself for people is really a diamond in the rough. I mean, you're talking to a guy that does not have a college education. Okay. I went in the Navy, like I said, and this business has been really good to me. It's been really good to my family. And it's really the men and the women in this industry that have done that for me. And anybody that knows me understands the value that I put not only on the entire team inside of the collision stores themselves, but especially the men and women that make my paycheck and make the paychecks of everybody else in the collision center. And those are those technicians. And so I always make sure that those men and women understand how appreciative I am for what they do for all of us. But I would say again, this business is a diamond in the rough. For those of you that are out there that may be listening, the earnings potential for anybody, and it doesn't matter what your education level is, I can tell you this, you need to at least take a look at it and talk to some people that are in this industry, because I think that you'd be very surprised about what it can do for you.
Man, well put. And I will tell you, there's so much that you just said that we could dive into and spend an hour plus long show. So I'm going to be very picky about what we dive into. But firstly, kind of bringing it back, I think we first crossed paths during your time at Asbury, got to know each other better and started to get to know each other really well at kind of the beginning stages of your time at Gerber in Florida. We probably sat across from each other in 2019 at a Bonefish Grill in the Tampa, Florida area, where I really got to kind of understand your philosophy, and I really appreciated it. It changed my perspective on a few different components of the collision repair industry. And one of those perspectives was from kind of that financial planning perspective. And you had kind of laid out a couple of different tranches for optimal efficiency from a revenue and profitability standpoint for a store. So to that, when you're looking at a P&L and planning for the future of a body shop, what are some key financial metrics that you focus on to ensure that the business is financially healthy and efficient?
Sure. That's a great question. So first, I would say that in terms of financial health, the men and the women that show up every day that help you in your business, they're really the reason why you're financially stable. Okay. Without them, you can't do everything. You can't even do anything by yourself. So let's get that first and foremost. So the team that you have really is going to help you and become financially healthy. But we're talking dollars and cents here. So,
and we'll talk team, don't you worry. We'll
Yeah,
talk
no, I
team
got you.
eventually.
Absolutely. Shop owners, they really should focus on their margins and be uniquely familiar with everything that really degradates them. Okay, and then of course, uh, any financially minded professional would tell you that the overall health of your company is solely based on your bottom line, or what we refer to as EBITDA. Um, I when I am professionally developing, from a financial standpoint, some of my teammates, um, I have a saying that I like to use, and I've used this for years. And it is one of those things that I came up with myself. I don't know how, but I didn't steal this from anybody, but my teammates love it, and that is top end revenue is for rookies. EBITDA is where the professionals play. So I'm not trying to minimize what top end revenue can do for you and your business. I'm merely suggesting it's how a person manages all the facets of their business that leads to higher EBITDA dollars. And so going to your point on what we talked about there at that Bonefish Grill, I personally, when I start building my own collision centers and building the structure around how that's going to work, and what I look at as far as top end revenue and what my goals are, um, you can really kind of manage yourself out of EBITDA dollars. And what I mean by that is there is a sweet spot, okay, in the collision business where your indirect costs start getting to a point when you get your top end revenue starts ticking up and up and up. Well, you're going to need people on the bottom floor, on on the concrete, to help you get to those levels, because those things don't just happen. You can't write or overwrite tickets just to get to a certain level. And you have to be able to justify what repairs you're doing to a vehicle. So you have to start adding vehicles to that. Well, that comes at a cost to be able to process all that work. So what I have found in my experience, that a shop that's doing somewhere around that 275 to 325 number, I'm going to make just as many EBITDA dollars, okay, just as many as somebody doing 400 or $450,000, and I can prove
Hmm.
that all day long, because you cannot stretch people out so thin. You're going to start losing out on CSI. You're going to start losing out on people following up on parts credits. You're going to start losing out on people following up on their AR, which all in turn degrade and lower your EBITDA dollars and percentages. So, and now, don't get me wrong, Cole. I'm not saying that you can't grow organically and go from 275 325, but you do need to be prepared that your bottom line is not going to start actually seeing the rewards of that increase in top end revenue until you get to that 475, even $500,000 mark. Then you're going to start seeing significant improvements or increases, excuse me, in your EBITDA dollars. So I, as I told you that day, I like the smaller stores. Your risk is less, right? Certainly, you're at you're at $500,000 and you miss by 10%. You're missing $50,000, and I'm not going to sit here and do the math for you, but you miss at a $250,000 store the same amount. It's half the amount.
Right.
Okay, it's half the amount. And then when you miss at a larger revenue, top end revenue, that can certainly have a more negative impact on your overall business, because all of your other expenses are greater than the store over at $250,000. So there's and again, I'm not saying I don't like $500,000 boxes. Love them. love them. Just saying, if that is your number one goal, you need to understand the risks of getting to that $500,000. Okay.
Man, yeah, I've never heard it put quite like that. And I love the way you put it. I love the analytical way in which you think about that. And I think it's going to have a lot of folks out there giving some thought about inefficiencies and those diminishing returns. Once you hit and exceed certain levels, those efficiencies go away or decrease at a minimum. Very, very interesting. You mentioned another key word that might be foreign to some of our listeners. I spent plenty of time in small business. That budget word, outside of a grocery budget or a car budget, might not resonate with folks. Talk to me about, just at a high level, how you approach budgeting and financial planning in collision repair, because I think that's something a lot of us are not doing in a very sophisticated way.
Sure. It's a great question. In general, I think every collision company has a similar approach, okay, to budgeting. And really, the goal is to have organic growth year over year. That's very important. Um, you know, you everybody has a different goal, and there is nothing wrong, absolutely nothing wrong with an independent shop owner who has been in the business a while. You know, Cole, they know exactly what their break even point is, and they're comfortable with a certain figure in a month's period. They're very they're very comfortable with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Um, and so, depending on what you think is sufficient year over year growth, that can really be the only difference, right? So, one company may say, "Hey, I'm good with 3%." One may say, "I'm good with 4%," while another is like, "No, I got to have 10% year over year growth," and it doesn't matter why. So let's start there. The other key piece here too is there are some people that budget by a revenue per square foot metric to determine their budget. Okay. Again, if you expand your footprint, certainly you're going to want to increase your budget, because obviously there were upfront costs to gaining those square feet. But there's so many different ways to do it. And again, financial growth, I'm going to tell you, is not always about the top line. It is my humble opinion that bottom line growth is way more important. Okay, it really is. So the bottom line growth tells me, and this is the EBITDA, it really tells me the strength of the leadership inside my organization and how they manage their store and their people inside them. So, you get a general manager that's been doing, finally gets his shot at being a general manager. He comes in, nobody's ever taught him how to read a P&L. He was an estimator yesterday, or shoot, maybe he wasn't even in the collision industry. Maybe he was doing something else, and they brought him in, and he's never looked at a P&L before. You have to train that person what to look at, and they're not going to learn this overnight, not at all. And I'm not saying you have to be a math whiz either. You just need to be able to recognize trends and things that are having a negative impact on those lines within your P&L. And the more you look at them, the better you're going to be. So whether it's on a weekly basis or every other basis, or at least a monthly basis, where you're actually diving into your P&L, looking at the things that maybe you could have done better. To me, going year over year, I personally, and this is just me, I'm worried about the dollars that I have at the bottom line to be able to put back into my business to grow in the first place. Because if I do $200,000 this year and I put $10,000 to the bottom line, but next year I do $200,000 again and I put $15,000 to the bottom line, that is the professional growth that I would love to see in my people, because they really know their business, they really know their people, and they are practiced on those things that they can either dial in or pull back on, and just, those levers, Cole, that everybody talks about pulling, to be able to run their business. So that, to me, brother, is how I look at it.
Love it, man. And I want to talk about some of those levers as well. Before I do, there's a phrase that comes to mind when you talk about revenue and revenue growth versus EBITDA and that bottom line. And it's drive for show, putt for dough, right? That long drive helps you. But at the end of the day, that efficiency, that finishing strong is going to be a major positive impact on a business. Yep. And a big part of that bottom line, and you mentioned it a little bit, you got your fixed costs. That is sort of what it is. As you grow, maybe that expands a bit just in rent and certain things. But those variable costs are typically what can sneak up and create those inefficiencies. What are some of those, labor aside, major variable cost centers that you see that people might not catch? And if they're not looking closely enough, might not realize there are some flashing red indicators.
Yeah. So, great question again. First, we're going to go back to the people once again, Cole, and this is a common theme here. Okay. Those people that come in every single day that support your sales, those are your indirect costs. Okay. If there's one thing that a good manager will do, or leader will do, is they will really have a high degree of focus on their indirect costs. So this is your general manager, this is your production manager, this is your estimators, this is your CSRs, your porters, your parts coordinators, anyone that doesn't actually add a dollar to your bottom line. So these are all your support people, right? And then with those people, managing their overtime. Their overtime can be an absolute EBITDA killer. Okay. And now, listen, don't get me wrong. There is good overtime in every business, but how you manage that and those indirect costs most likely will be the difference between being EBITDA positive or negative.
And I'm going to stop you right there and dive a little bit deeper. And I think that good overtime versus bad overtime is really interesting. And the term that comes to mind is labor efficiency. How do you kind of judge that? Is there any way to quantify labor efficiency, or how do you kind of keep that differentiation?
Yeah. So labor efficiency. So in our terms, Cole, in a body shop level, when we're talking about labor efficiency, we're really talking more along technicians,
Sure.
Right? But back to the indirect costs, and I'll bring it home here. A well-managed collision center is going to be around 11% with their indirect costs, and if you can manage to that metric, chances are you're going to have a positive dollars at the bottom line, unless of course your occupancy costs are so out of whack, you could be fighting an uphill battle. But anyway, back to your question in terms of labor efficiency, it's solely based around the number of hours a tech can turn based upon the number of hours they physically are on the clock. So if a tech works an 8-hour day, you want him to turn around 16 hours in flag hours, if you will. That makes that tech 200% efficient. Anybody that's been in this business long enough to know, really understands that labor is by far the number one place that can have the most significant impact on our gross profit, because it has the highest margin opportunity that we have. So I'm not speaking for all the techs here, but I think that most techs would agree that if they can turn twice the number of hours that they worked on the clock, they would consider that a win. And it doesn't matter what that is, whether it's 9 hours and they turn 18, whatever it is. Maybe not a victory, right? At the end of the day, I know plenty of technicians that would love to work an 8 hour day and turn 24 hours, but
Sure.
it's definitely a win, right? And that's as a general manager or leader or a business owner, I want my technicians to be at least 200%. I'd love for them to be higher than that, but if we can get them all to 200%, I think I would consider that a win. Um, Cole, how you hand out work inside the store, and the difficulty of the repair plays a key role in how in your labor efficiency as well. I mean, and so I'll say it this way: you don't want your most junior technician performing the most difficult repair that you have, or vice versa, right? You don't want your most experienced tech performing the easiest repair either. And really, that's why in this business, we have categories: A tech, B tech, C tech. And, up until the past 2 or 3 years, when, the labor force has gotten so competitive, we did have, at one point, we did have a healthy uh, balance between uh, uh, labor rates for an A technician and a B technician, a C technician. But over these past few years, it's been so competitive. That gap has really, really, really lessened and lessened. So there's a fine line that good managers can ride when deciding who to assign these repairs to.
Fantastic. And at a broad level, because I know it is so dependent on individual shops, individual skill sets, but we do talk about some of those levers you can pull to increase margin, increase efficiency. From your perspective, what are some examples of those levers?
So in terms of labor, or
Yeah, all the above. All the above. How can we be more profitable?
well, so listen, at the end of the day, um, at having the perfect mix of experienced level techs is important in terms of effective labor rates. Um, you need to be able to you certainly need to make sure that you're getting the best discounts that you can from your parts vendors. Um, you know, Always consistently calling around, and I'm talking to most of you independent shop owners. I know, and believe me, I own my own shop. I understand the importance of relationship. I really do, because it is important, because you build relationships your entire life, um, and most of those are built around trust. And you meet some new people, you're not always sure about them, but especially parts. People love to talk to the same people because they think they're going to take care of them. But I am not saying that uh, that they won't take care of you if you ask them to give you a better discount. But I certainly would call around and just make sure that the man or the woman or the company that is providing you with your parts discount, that they're giving you something that's competitive in the market. um, because certainly the margins on parts keeps lessening, and you need every dollar you can get. Um, Asking your estimators to keep an eye on their AR, make sure it's clean, is highly important. Your parts coordinators, they need to have a tight system on following up on parts credits. Um, but truly, at the end of the day, in terms of profitability, Cole, um, charging for everything that you do on an estimate so that you can get that vehicle back to pre-accident condition, that's really the biggest key. And listen, I'm not talking about inflating repair costs just to make a profit. That is not at all what I'm saying. You should not do that. Um, but you do need to make sure that your team, your whole team, is educated on what our insurance partners allow us to charge for and bill for. Okay. This and that piece of that changes all the time, constantly, due to the ever-changing ways that vehicles are being repaired. So I think all those things are pretty key.
Man, so many great points. That last one, especially, you see it all the time. I know you do in your world, looking at P&Ls of existing stores, of potential acquisitions. In my world, certainly, countless examples of real costs increasing quicker than shops are able to realize and able to charge for, and
Yeah,
decreasing margin. And you have to have a really good pulse on that to avoid that.
yeah.
Um, Really, really good stuff, actionable stuff so far as we talk about increasing margin. I do want to talk about the revenue growth piece as well and talk to you about kind of planning for growth. Obviously, you've been responsible at a high level for P&Ls of 100 plus stores at any given time for a few years now. You know growth. What are some key considerations when you are embarking on a strategy of growth? What do you look for? How do you plan your organization for it? How do you plan yourself as a leader for it? What can people expect?
Well, any first of all, anybody's going to tell you in terms of growth, um, location, 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 right? Um, you don't have a business, and unless you have a good location. And certainly, you know, I guess you could put one in your backyard, if you really wanted to, but the likelihood of people, um, you know, taking you seriously. I'm not saying that you don't do good work and you can't do good in your backyard, but people need to be able to find you, and they need to be, they need to feel safe about dropping their vehicle off to you. Um, how many
And I don't
repair
want to
dollars?
derail, I don't want to
Yeah.
derail that question or that list, but at a really high level and
Yep.
briefly, how would you quantify a good location? Are there any metrics that folks can consider there?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's a number of tools that you can use, and I'll just give you one that is kind of close to my heart. So, when we looked at a pro forma on a location, one of the key pieces that we looked at was PPG. Because of how large that they can give you a fairly accurate depiction on what the market size is in terms of dollars. And so what we would look at is, what market we're in, how many stores we have in that market, um, and then we did look at how many our competition did have, right? And so we would want to make sure that we weren't taking too much of the market share away from ourselves, because there's only so much to go around, and everybody is going to get their fair share, if you will. But market size really, really was one of the key drivers to where we were going to put these locations, and it did have to do with where we were currently in some of our competition. Yeah, but that
Wonderful.
was
That's
that was key.
perfect. Perfect. So back on the rails, my fault there, but let's keep it going in terms of kind of considerations when planning for growth.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So listen, just adding a store, for store count, that's not a healthy strategy. All right. My parents were entrepreneurs themselves, and they had multiple stores. But when they added a store, they were very deliberate on how they chose and where and who they bought. And their strategy was what I talked about already: location, location, location. And then they really liked try to find businesses either that were underperforming or maybe even failing, that had tremendous upside, um, because they were confident in their ability to turn the ship. But I would say that from a collision industry standpoint, listen, we are in a fairly recession resistant, I don't want to say proof, industry. People are going to get in accidents every single day. Whether or not you can afford your deductible sometimes plays a key role into whether or not you have your vehicle repaired or not. At the end of the day, a claimant 99 out of 100 times, unless, they're in, financial strife outside of the accident, should and will get their vehicles repaired. So, um, I would say that, you know, don't necessarily throw away, rural America, but just make sure that, like I told you about in the beginning of this segment, that market size can can hold another collision center for you and for the people that are already there.
Sure. Well put. From an organizational standpoint and from a personal standpoint,
Hmm.
when can you feel comfortable in an organization's ability to handle growth? And then kind of part B of that question, as a leader, how does that skill set differ from a single store or a small group to a really growth oriented company?
Sure. Um, Great question. Well, I think it's important to know that a shop's success, again, I'm gonna bring it back always. You know me, I'm a team guy.
I
Cole.
know it, man. A recurring theme, and I love it.
Yeah, and so we don't look. You don't do what you do by yourself. I certainly have not done what I've done by myself. I have worked with some pretty spectacular men and women in my career that all decided that we wanted to row in the same direction, and so that's what's made us successful. And so I'm gonna start out again talking about, the success is solely based upon the people that come to work with you every day. If you don't have a team, you don't have a business. If you don't have culture, you don't have a team. Okay. Um, we were quite successful in opening many stores, and those stores are flourishing even today. Um, However, I would say that there came a point, or there can come a point, where you may lose focus on whether growth is just going to be a win for your owners or your shareholders, or whether it's just going to be a win for your employees' bonus structure. Now, I'm not suggesting that financial responsibility um, gets negated uh, when people look at growth. But you got to have discipline. You have to have discipline when you talk about growth, and doing it for all the right reasons. Okay, doing it for the reasons that there's the market area can hold another collision company, right? And and if it can't, then maybe you should back up, not necessarily punt, but maybe look at what the population growth is moving forward in the next 5 years. Uh, just because today's not the day that it's time to put a store in a certain area, 2 years from now could. And so maybe planning for that is better than just, uh, that not every business can be the field of dreams, right? Build it and they will come. It's not how this works, unfortunately. So just, being financially responsible about whether that area can hold another collision center is probably a key.
No question about it. Getting introspective with you. What makes a good leader in a growing organization for call it a single store owner out there listening to this and saying, "Hey, definitely want to improve the bottom line, but I want to grow that top line as well." How can they kind of take a survey of themselves and see if they're really the right fit for approaching it in that way?
Okay. So I think I'm saying what you're saying is just a good leader in the business. How do they uh, how do they determine whether or not they're a good leader? And is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, and a good leader beyond what they know. How can they feel comfortable in growing beyond their comfort zone?
Sure. Well, first of all, uh, professional development, okay, and the amount of time that they spend keeping up with industry trends, the impact that uh, our manufacturers and the way that they're building the cars, making sure that their equipment is up to date on proper repair procedures, and just the way that the way that metals are made today. We have to have different tools to be able to fix these vehicles, right? And so I would say that staying current on that, certainly at the end of the day, having a litmus test and keeping a pulse on your entire team inside the store, making sure that, hey, you you walk in every day and you say, hey, how you doing? You find out a little bit about what's going on. People, you don't have to go in every single day and tell me, hey, Cole, tell me your life story again today. Just, man, just walking in and smiling and saying, hey, how's it going today? And reminding everybody that this is going to be a good day. As a leader, you're not allowed to have a bad day. You're just not, right? That stuff's contagious. You can find yourself coming in and allowing outside influences to have negative impact on you. And I can guarantee you at some point during that day, that's going to have an effect on your team. Financial acuity is good because those people can stay ahead of the curve in terms of what's going on inside the store on a given day or a given week. They're able to look at trends and stop them a little bit quicker, or start better ones a little more quicker. But that's really all through experience and what we talked about earlier about looking at your P&L on a daily or a weekly or at least a monthly basis. You really do. And if you don't have that type of skill, you can still be successful. Okay, you really can. So many times I had general managers that they didn't understand percentages, they didn't understand margin, nothing. But the one thing that I could do is I could write down ranges for each of those P&L lines, for each of those ledger lines. So as long as, if I was talking to you, Cole, I could give you a range, and hey, listen, if you see the range go inside or outside this range, you need to start digging into the facts and the details of what's going on that particular ledger line. And you keep up with that, you're going to do well.
Well said. And that first point, I think, is super interesting. The trends, keeping up to date with what's happening in the industry, I think it's extremely important. It's a goal here at the Collision Vision, right, to help with that. One trend, and I want to talk about a few, but the first I want to spend just a little bit of time on is something we talk about regularly, and that is private equity. And I know you've spent some time in big publicly traded companies, but I know you're also familiar with the world of private equity. Talk to me about kind of how operators should view private equity's role in the collision repair ecosystem.
Yeah, good question. So I think that, I personally believe that consolidation is good for our business. And people have different views about that. But I will tell you that at the end of the day, you have strength in numbers, right? I mean, anytime, anytime you have a group of people that can get together and they are like-minded, you're gonna have some influence on that particular industry. And I think that at the end of the day, it is going to help the relationship between us and our insurance partners to really come up with trends and the way that we both feel about how vehicles are repaired, what the costs associated with those should be at the end of the day, and then really how all these vehicles should be distributed amongst everyone. You know, I don't ever want to see a company go out of business. And I've heard people talk about, oh, I'd like to see such and such company go out of business. Um, and really that's really a personal feeling because maybe they were not treated well at that particular company. But at the end of the day, you forget about all those men and women that work for that company that's going to have a negative impact on too. So, but I digress a little bit there. But you know, I personally believe private equity has a huge role in what we do, and I truly do think that there needs to be, although we have some really big, you've got the big five or six. I think there needs to be another segment of, and it's starting that way too, of maybe 20 or even 30 more private equity companies that get 150 stores. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think there would be some strength there. Uh, and again, I am not suggesting that it's us against the insurance companies. It's absolutely not. We need to figure out a way to be partners because at the end of the day, the customer that's coming to us was their customer first. They really are. And Cole, anybody that owns a business, people talk about, oh, this insurance company doesn't pay for this insurance company doesn't pay for that. At the end of the day, it's incumbent upon us again to fix the car to pre-accident condition and to get paid as much as we can for what we're doing. And really, at the end of the day, insurance companies are business too. They have to control costs because at the end of the day, they're controlling costs for you and me. I haven't had an accident in 25, 30 years, but I'm paying just about the same amount of premium as somebody that's probably had an accident or two. And so people don't understand that, right? People don't understand the negative impact that it has on the insurance space when costs go up. Your insurance premiums are going to follow it. I mean, they're just, their profit lines have to stay the same so they can stay in business. But I do, again, I'm digressing back into that, but I see a huge benefit to the private equity sector in this space because we still have 25,000 plus independent shop owners. So you want to talk about a business that hasn't even been touched in terms of private equity, where there's a huge opportunity for them to get into it by far.
Oh yeah.
I mean, 20, I think the last time I looked, I think that between the large MSOs, the private equity that's already in it, and the smaller MSOs that are let's call it 4+ stores, I believe they still only make up about 20 to 25% of the entire market. So that's a huge opportunity for private equity, and
Man,
I welcome it.
could not agree more. For as long and as regularly as we speak about consolidation, it feels like we must be coming to the end of consolidation. But it's true. If you look at the numbers, the amount of independent shops still out there, the percentage that consolidators make up of the marketplace, it's surprisingly low. And you just said some absolutely great things that I'm not going to dive into every one of them for the sake of your time, but to your point about kind of pulling for the success of some of these consolidators or private equity backed roll-ups, rising tides lift all boats. The fact that private equity is so interested in the space that we're all operating in is such a good thing. It means we're onto something. And you hit the nail on the head with a recession resistant or recession resilient industry. There's so much to like. There are so many tailwinds for this industry at the macro level that I think is really exciting and really a good thing. I do want to talk about some tailwinds and some headwinds and ask you to pull out eventually your crystal ball. But for right now, we've talked about a couple as we sit here talking late summer 2024, a couple industry trends that are happening in front of our eyes that you have astutely pointed out in some of our off recording conversations. Talk to me about what we're seeing trend wise in the marketplace that could be impactful for companies now and down the road.
Sure. Um, so number one, the trend, the one that's kind of hitting us all in the face is the um, the whip levels that we're seeing right at store at locations. So um, it's really kind of, I don't know if it's funny or ironic, but we have, I think, become short-sighted. We've spent the past 3 years enjoying the highest level of claim counts and whip levels that we've ever seen in this industry. And for whatever reason, people are hitting the panic button now. And I understand why, because it's that hockey stick that nobody likes to see in their sales and their growth. But the fact remains, Cole, we're just now getting back to 2000 pre-pandemic 2019 levels of work. And yes, eventually we are going to see a degradation in claim count. Why? Well, you've got things like, ADOS systems that are ever evolving, keeping people from running into one another. Now, I will have to say, I'm still, shocked and stunned by some of the vehicles that come in that have damage that you think to yourself, man, did the blind spot monitor not work on that car? Or did the rear sensors or the front sensors not go off when they were in? I'm not driving the car. I don't know what it was, but it still is amazing that we do have the collision work that we do have, given all the advanced technologies that they have in terms of ADOS. But I would say that, back to the pre-pandemic levels, that would be the biggest trend, I would say, Cole, is just getting your mentality back to knowing that, hey, maybe claim count's going down. All right. But don't forget, the severity of claims has gone up tremendously. And it's not just because insurance companies are paying us, higher insurance rates in terms of labor, but you got parts that have increased over 20% over the past 3 years. These ADOS systems, they are not cheap. And they do require recalibrations, which, depending on which person you talk to, there are some high costs associated with that. But really, at the end of the day, Cole, I think that the biggest trend that anybody needs to accept is that we are going to go down to 2019 claim counts. And for those regions in the country that had seasonal impact, and I'm talking, mostly about, Florida, maybe some, California, and those warmer climate areas where people are well off enough to have a summer and a winter home. That's coming back now that most of the entire world has reopened their doors to everyone coming in and leaving as they see fit. You're going to have that. So, and the only other trend that I would talk about, and we covered it a little bit, is the ADOS trend and how that's going to continue to play in account for some of the dollars on the estimate. I think that at some point, we've got to get a hold of some of the calibration costs that we are charging. And listen, I am not advocating for lesser severity, and I am just advocating for maybe some consistency, so that it makes it easier on our estimators and our shop owners to do business, because we've got all of these calibration companies out there, and they're charging what they feel is adequate, and it's not always consistent. And I don't know what the answer to that is, and I think that's going to be a big question moving forward. I think and not to get out on another subject, but everybody is probably familiar with the meeting that they had in CIC last month or earlier this month, I think, where there was some heavy discussions about ADOS and charging for it. But I think those are the trends that we're seeing right now, Cole.
Man, always appreciate your insights and the level of thought that you can put into taking data and trends and giving some really actionable information and insights. Greatly appreciated. And you've been so generous with your time. I do want to start to wrap up and get to our takeaways. Before I do that, you're at a very interesting juncture in your career. For anybody who's familiar with the world of tech startups, I would say you're in stealth mode on a couple different things. And so I want to put you on the spot here and tell us what you can about some exciting things ahead.
Hey, I appreciate it. So I over the past 10, 15 years, we all understand that there's been a tech shortage, right? Every company has had their strategy on how to attack it. Okay. Some companies have done a better job than others, and some have taken, a more aggressive approach to adding techs to the workforce. And I'm not saying that nobody's doing anything, but there are some standouts out there that I think have done a really good jobs. However, I would say that there is something out there that nobody has thought up to this point about. And that is maybe we really don't have a tech shortage. Maybe we are just not utilizing the techs that we have at our disposal the most efficient way that we can. And what I mean by that is, let's take a second and look outside the box, okay, if you will. What if you had something, and let's call it, for argument's sake, tech share? What does tech share mean to you? It may mean something completely different to you than it means to me. But at the end of the day, Cole, I've identified a kind of a vacuum, right? Where I've identified a way that I think a body shop can be run. And I don't know if it's going to necessarily revolutionize the way that we run collision centers, but I will say this. If you could take it, if you are an independent shop owner and you are looking for a technician, a painter, and let me be specific, a body technician, a paint technician, or an estimator, at the end of the day, we all have turnover. But what if, just what if, you had the ability to utilize one of the technicians or the painters, maybe that was only a mile away from you, or maybe he was 5 miles away from you, or maybe even 10 miles away from you, but that technician or that estimator or that painter, they had nothing going on at their location. And what if they had the ability to come to your store and do the skilled piece of the repair? Just the skilled piece that we as shop owners don't have the time or the resources maybe to train the next generation. What if there was a system that could utilize all that downtime that we all know technicians have, and that they are going to have here moving forward with the claim counts going down. What if there was a way or an app or a website where you could utilize that as text share? What if you could do that? Think about the savings in terms of benefits, in terms of payroll, taxes, all of those things. But I also want you to think about this: retention. If your store has 80% of the work that a technician feels like he's comfortable with making, what if there was a way to fill up that 20% of the time that he's sitting on his bucket? And it doesn't matter why he's sitting on his bucket. He could be waiting on paperwork. He could be waiting on a vehicle to come out of the paint shop. He could be waiting on another vehicle even showing up, right? Or heaven forbid, the old adage, I'm waiting on parts, right? It doesn't matter why he's sitting on his bucket. All you know is that he's sitting on his bucket. He's got his phone in his hand, or her, and they're looking at Indeed, or they're looking at Facebook, or they're looking at Craigslist or wherever, but they're not turning wrenches and banging on any metal, which means they're not making any money, because most of the technicians in the market force, they are 100% commission based. Not all. There's still some salaried people out there and hourly technicians, but the largest segment of our industry is commission. What if we could utilize the technicians we already have? And remember, we were talking about tech efficiency earlier, Cole. You want to talk about tech efficiency? This takes it to an entire new level. And that particular product is called Bolt. And I'm proud to say that we are going to be at SEMA this year, and we're going to introduce Bolt to the collision world, and going to show everybody how tech share is going to revolutionize our industry. And the one way that I can kind of bring it back into a nutshell, ride share is to Uber as tech share is going to be to Bolt. It's about the same concept. It's the gig industry. So for you listeners out there that don't know anything about the gig industry, check it out. Gig industry is really where the millennials and the Gen Zs are headed. They want this. They want this, and we need to listen. I've got 5 kids of my own. They're all millennials. They're all grown, but they are all millennials. And if you ask them, if you gave them a choice on what they wanted to do, they would love to do gig work. So take a look and see what gig work is.
Oh yeah, you hit the nail on the head with the millennials. Guilty as charged there, but very exciting. Congratulations on that. Looking forward to keeping a close eye on what you have going on. Now I'll fish one more time. Not that one exciting thing is not enough, because I'm excited to see what you got going on. Anything else cooking you can share?
Yeah. So I've got we've been talking about the private equity sector as well. And, I have been fortunate enough to get a company that thought enough about me and what I can do to invest in an opportunity for me to do exactly what I was talking about here. And that is, on your last question, and that is hopefully revolutionize the way that our body shops are run. I'm going to have an opportunity for some consolidation, so to acquire some stores, and to build some what we call in the industry brownfields and greenfields. And so I'm looking forward to getting to operate in my businesses and take care of my teams the way that I see fit. And man, Cole, I can't tell you how excited I am about that. It has been a lifelong dream for me to be able to do this, and I'm going to get the opportunity to do this. I got to do it once when I was, as I told you, when I came right out of the Navy, and it has been a long life goal for me to get back to that point, and I'm there now, and so can't tell you how truly excited I am about that, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And listen, I've got a lot of peers that I've met over the 30 years nearly that I've been in this business that are rooting for me, that are doing the same thing, and I'm rooting for them. And so, competition is healthy, and it really is. Love it. Just makes you better. That's why there's always a backup quarterback. When you've only got one quarterback on the team and he knows it, his level of play may not be as much as if you've got a backup that's always nipping at his heels for playing time. So same thing here. So I'm excited about it. Thanks for asking.
Man, excited for you about it, and likewise looking forward to following along with that journey and some incredible success in the past. Here's to even more incredible success in the future. With that, so much to break down, so much quality content in our conversation today. It's tough to do just 3, but as you know, we do like to end each episode of the Collision Vision with 3 key takeaways. What would those takeaways be from our conversation today?
Yeah. So for all you independent shop owners out there that listen to Cole's podcast, I want you to, we've sort of broken it down little by little throughout this whole question and answer, but I do want to point something out here. Claim counts are going down, and so will WIP levels, and I think some of you, and not all of you, believe me, it's not all of you, but some of you are starting to see your top end revenue coming down because of it. There's just, there's a lot of collision centers out there, and there's only so much to go around, and we're all trying to grab our fair share. But I do know that based upon my experience over the past 6-7 months, seeing the WIP levels and claim counts come down, I do know it's having a negative impact on all of you out there. So I'm going to challenge you all to really evaluate what impact this is having on your business. Now, maybe you've had a consolidator come to you, or maybe you've had a private equity company, or maybe you've just had another independent shop owner come and say, "Hey, listen, have you ever thought about selling?" I would say that, and listen, this is not a scare tactic. This is just real talk here. Okay. Over the past 6 months, my previous company, our sales have been going down and down and down and down and down and down and down, which is having a negative impact on the valuation of our company. That has to be happening to you. So what I would say is, at the end of the day, this is probably a very, very, very pivotal point in whether or not you want to sell now or wait. And I would say that every month that goes by, it is going to have a negative impact on the valuation, because how we as consolidators look at that evaluating business, we take a 13-month trend. And so I would challenge you to do that right now. If you are one of those business owners that have been looking to sell, I would go back and I would look at your 13-month trend and see what kind of impact it's had. If it's having no impact on you right now, then good for you. But I think most of you out there are going to see that it's having a huge impact. And every month that goes by, it is going to devalue what we consider your business is worth, because it is 13 months. Now, is that everything? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But it is one of the key drivers on the valuation of what we think the business is worth. So take a look at that, see what your trend is. And if you see it on the path that most of us are seeing, and you have considered exiting the space, I believe in, listen, not everybody, but I truly believe for some of you that have been um, really contemplating getting out, I think this is the best time. So really look at that 13-month trend, and I think you'll find that what I'm saying is probably more true than not.
Well put. Yeah, very interesting times in our industry at this point
Very.
right now. Got a lot of tailwinds and certainly some headwinds in the short and medium term. But Walt, man, awesome conversation. Greatly appreciate your time, your insights, the cerebral way in which you view the industry. I think has a million takeaways from this conversation. Where can people follow along with you or get in touch?
Yeah, thanks. So, for those of you that have any interest in taking a look at what I was talking about in terms of Bolt, I would challenge you to go to www.workforbolt.com and register. The site itself has some executable material in it. It is not 100% complete in terms of everything working properly, but there's enough on there for all of you to kind of take a look and see what is coming. And like I said, we are having our product launch at SEMA, which is in November. And I guarantee you that everything will be ready to go then. But I'd love to get everybody excited about what's coming, Cole, and you have an opportunity to take a look at that. So please check us out, and I really am looking forward to seeing everybody. We will be in the Upper South Hall, right outside of registration in SEMA. So come see me, come give us a look, and hope you'll find something interesting about what we're trying to do here.
Fantastic, man. I can picture myself there right now. I know that area all too well. Walt Link, man, again, congratulations on the success to this point, and here's to even more here moving forward. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Cole, I appreciate your time. I really do, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Walt Link for joining us on today's show. I really appreciate Walt's perspective on things. He makes you think about the things you might not normally think about in a very different way than you think about them. And I love the approach, and I really do think very highly of Walt. I did want to briefly reiterate some takeaways from this conversation, and those were number one, there are a lot of tailwinds, the positives for the collision industry, some really positive things. But you can tell Walt believes we might be in for some tough times sooner rather than later. And with that comes a lot of things to consider, your runway being one of them. My sentiments aren't too far off. We have options as an industry, but doing what we've always done is not one of those options. I also loved Walt's take on the technician shortage. Are we underutilizing the talent in this industry? And if so, how can we reconcile that? I know Walt offered some thoughts and is offering a solution throughout the conversation that is worth listening to. That's all for today's show, and I hope to see you next week as our brand new series titled Operational Excellence: Shop Strategies for Success continues all month long. As always, be sure to hit that follow button wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube, where the Collision Vision lives in video form. And share the Collision Vision with your industry friends if you found this episode or any of the others helpful. As always, on behalf of the Auto Body News team and myself, thank you for coming along for the ride.